Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and today I'm excited to have XYPN member Nannette, founder of Inspiration Planning, on the show today. Nannette spent the first part of her career in IT, eventually earning her MBA and working her way up the career ladder. But she came to the realization that she wanted to make a change in her career and ended up finding and starting the CFP coursework. After some research, she found XY Planning Network and some articles members had written about starting a firm, and she ended up diving straight in and hasn't looked back. She passed her CFP exam early on, but is still working on the experience requirement and is about a year away from being able to use the designation. She did say that she feels like not having the CFP has held her back, but she's been building into a niche doing college planning work for clients, and that has been lately helping her to grow. Nannette also moved her firm across the country, and we talked about how she made that decision and communicated the change to her clients. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/107. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Nannette. Hey, Nannette, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited because Maddie, I believe, was the one on the team. Every week we do our meetings, and she had mentioned like, hey, I had this cool conversation with Ned, or I don't know, maybe she had seen something in the forums. She's like, you got to have her on the show. So when Maddie gets excited, it's always good. Usually means there's something really cool in the story. So
okay, I'll try to live up to that.
No pressure. So I guess just starting from the beginning, is this the career that you thought you were going to be getting into? Or I guess what was sort of your college path?
Well, I was a Spanish major, which, directly leads to a financial planning career.
Of course.
I started college in biology and decided I didn't want to be a doctor very quickly. And I was in a management program that I was at a small liberal arts school in Indiana, and I was in a management honors program. And so I was going to do, business and biology. And then I switched to Spanish because I had so much Spanish in high school that I could get, the degree done in 4 years. So I was thinking international business. And then by the time I got to be a senior, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll go to law school. So I went to law school at Indiana University for a year and realized very quickly that I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I'm, going through and knocking off things I don't want to be, but never really figured out what I did want to be. Hopefully, I've now figured that out. So from law school, I went to Purdue University for computer science, which is another strange jump. But I had met somebody, this was the late 90s, and I had met somebody who had graduated from Purdue in the computer science program, went out to Silicon Valley, got a great job. And I'm like, well, if this guy can do it, I can certainly do it. Thinking I need a job, and there's not a whole lot of demand for Spanish majors from liberal arts schools. I went to Purdue for 3 semesters and I got a job with Motorola as a business analyst. And I had planned to get another degree, but they said, you already have a bachelor's degree. You've got enough of a technology background now that you can do a business analyst role, which is a combination between business and technology. We'll go ahead and offer you a job. So I started the first week of January of 2000, after the world didn't end, in Y2K, which was great. My job was still there and the lights stayed on. And so I had a business and technology hybrid career for about 15 years in various different industries. I worked at Motorola. I worked at Discover Financial Services. I worked at, ironically, a really big law firm in Chicago for over 5 years in the part of the business that sort of analyzes how lawyers, how much money they're making the firm, which was really fascinating. I mean, learning how a professional services firm is run and how they assess profitability, it was fascinating. And I really enjoyed that particular job. But I started thinking, I wanted to kind of get a little further away from technology and focus more on the business side of my career. And so in, 2006, I started my MBA at Kellogg and I was going part-time while I was working full-time. So I did that. And my job actually didn't pay for any of it. I was at the law firm at the time and they didn't have any tuition reimbursement. So I was looking at probably a $95,000 investment in getting my MBA.
Yeah. So what caused you to, I guess, why make that level of investment? Because that's a huge sum of money and a huge amount of time.
Well, yes. And I didn't really do a lot of analysis on it, to be honest. I thought I really want to transition into more of a business career. I need to get an MBA. I'd been out of school almost 10 years, so I felt like I had some experience to bring to the table. They liked the fact that I was female in technology, and, Kellogg was the only place I applied. And in my interview, I told them, I'm either going here or I'm going to University of Chicago if I don't get in here. Because if you're in Chicago and you don't go to one of those programs, I just felt like the investment wasn't, worth it at that point. So if you can get a top 5 MBA, the investment's worth it. But sometimes if you don't, then it's not necessarily. That's the extent of the analysis I did.
No, it makes sense. And MBA is a tough one. Like I've mentioned on the show, our COO is getting his MBA. Now he's prior military. So the military, he is still in the military. He is no longer active duty, but he's getting his MBA, and it makes a lot of sense to me in the position that he's in. And we hired him after he was starting that program. But I don't know. I've never applied or really researched MBA programs. So I know there are certain career paths, especially in business, that sort of necessitate it. And it's just, you got to have the 3 letters to be able to move up the rungs. But, I've been told like the value of your MBA are just the other people you meet in your MBA program, more so than anything.
Well, and I think that's true. It's probably more so true in a full-time program, to be honest, because the part-time program, you're not really in classes with a particular cohort of students. You've got people that are there trying to get it done in 2 years. You've got people that are there, taking their time like me, and just sort of taking 1 or 2 classes. I skipped a quarter here and there. I met my now husband, and then I got pregnant and I switched jobs. And so I was doing a lot of other things. Once I got pregnant, I was like, okay, it's really time to finish this. So I did finish in 2010. And at the time I worked for Discover Financial Services, and I felt like, and they were paying for part of it, which was great. I felt like that was really going to make a difference in moving my career forward. And it ended up not doing that, which surprised me. I'm like, you guys paid for part of this. Why wouldn't you want to sort of leverage that investment in me? I was there maybe 2 years after I finished, and just, it didn't get me what I wanted to get out of it. So I switched jobs again. I did a lot of job switching. So I went from Discover to US Cellular, and actually went into a true IT role there, which was not really, again, the direction I wanted to take my career. So I was there for about 18 months, and then I thought I found my dream job at GE Capital. It was in a marketing role that was focused on business intelligence leader was the title. And the part of GE Capital that I was in provided financing to motorcycle dealers and boat dealers to help them procure their inventory, and then they would pay GE Capital back after they sold it. I was helping the small business owners, a lot of them are small business owners, analyze that inventory and helping them figure out, what inventory is going faster. Is there any way we can use analytics to predict what will sell better, using information from your part of the country? Is it seasonal? Is there any impact? Weather, obviously, weather has a big impact on sales of RVs in Montana, probably, so it was really fascinating to be helping those business owners make those decisions and analyze their data. But unfortunately, about 8 months in, my team was reorged into IT. And I'm thinking, man, I can't get away from IT. And I wanted to be business, and I'm stuck back in IT. And I just was like, okay, it's time to really start thinking seriously about switching careers. And I was lucky at that point that my husband had gotten to a point in his career where it was even possible. I was making a lot of money in IT, and I was older than him. And so when we met, our careers were in different places. And then by the time I sort of started thinking about leaving IT for good, we were in a better spot for me to be able to think about that. So in the summer of 2014, we were on vacation, and I was researching CFP programs. And, I said, hon, I really want to try this out. Every career assessment I had ever done told me that personal financial something was a high match for me. And I had just never done it. And so he's like, "We'll take the coursework. We'll see how you like it." And so I started the online program from Boston University. And I was actually able to convince my boss at the time to let me work 4 days a week, which was really helpful. I had 2 little kids and a full-time job, and I was working on the CFP coursework. And it was
just a few things on your plate.
Just a few things on my plate, yeah. And so that was the summer of 2014 that I started that. And then during the winter, my boss kind of came to me after year end, "Oh, you've got an excellent on your review. People haven't even noticed that you're gone 1 day a week. You're really providing great service to people. And oh, by the way, we're going to need you to come back to 5 days a week." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to need to quit." So I literally, the day my bonus hit my bank account, I put in my resignation. And that was in February of 2015.
So let me ask you this. I mean, as a parent myself, I understand the joys and honestly the burden of trying to balance parenthood, being in a relationship, having a job, trying to further your career. How did you and your husband make that work? Just from a family perspective, that you were able to sort of accomplish what you wanted to accomplish?
Gosh, I don't know that we can ever put the stamp on it and say we've made it work. It's an ongoing conversation, and it's tough. It is really tough. And it was easier to do when I was able to have that day of the week where I could basically spend studying. I'm lucky that I learn very fast and that I've never really had a problem taking tests or doing schoolwork and learning new things. So I do have that going for me. So it probably took me less work than probably somebody else. And when I came to him and I said, I'm thinking about quitting, he's like, "Well, we need to figure out what this looks like then." I had actually been doing, I listened to your podcast with Meg recently, and I had been doing some informational interviewing, literally looking at the NAPFA directory and finding people that were close and reaching out to people, asking people who their advisor was and calling them up. I talked to a guy from Merrill Lynch. I talked to a guy from Chase. I talked to a guy who owned his own firm. I actually interviewed for jobs at 3 very different firms in the Chicago area. And, at the end of the day, I knew I wanted to be fee only. I knew I wanted to start my own firm. And, my husband and I talked through it, and it's like, well, this is going to be a 5-year plan then, because you don't have your CFP, and we can't really assess whether this is working. We have to be prepared to live without any income on your side for a long time.
So what drew you to be able to start your own firm? Because it sounds like this is sort of your first entrepreneurial journey. So what was it about starting your own firm that was attractive?
A couple things. So when I had done my interviews with the other firms, I interviewed at an ultra high net worth firm in Chicago, and the woman said, "We like you, but I really think from what you've told me in the interview process that you want to serve a different clientele than we have." And I appreciated that, because that was a very honest piece of feedback that I needed to hear. And she was right. I wanted to serve Gen X people like me who, I'd never had a financial planner, and I had gone through a ton of, financial challenges and decisions and never really had a person to count on in that way. So the serving the clientele that I wanted to serve was a big thing. The second thing was, one of the other firms I interviewed with was telling me, "Well, you need to be in the office from 8 to 5 every day, like physically here. We don't really do the work from home thing." And being in technology, and that was, the thought of, and it was probably a 45-minute to an hour commute each way for me for that particular job. And I just couldn't, that made me want to throw up, to be honest. So it was the combination of serving the clients that I wanted to serve and having the lifestyle that I wanted to have that really told me I need to do this myself.
It's really interesting, because I think in a lot of fields, something like software development or something like that, I feel like people get into entrepreneurship because they're very attracted to entrepreneurship. And in financial planning, many of us, ended up starting our own businesses because it was the only way to do the type of work we wanted to be able to do and the lifestyle that we wanted to be able to live. Because again, like you, any commute more than probably 5 minutes in the car, and like I'm pulling my hair out. Like I cannot do commutes. It just drives me crazy. And so like there's not a lot of jobs where you get to live 5 minutes from work. Fortunately, I actually found a house next door to my first office when I worked at Kaler Financial Group, so I could walk to work, which was awesome. But like, it does matter, and you're losing a lot of time with family, and, it's hard to just like uproot your whole family and move 45 minutes away to be closer to work. So it is amazing I guess part of those decisions that come into it. But that's what I was curious about. Was it more like, I just want to create this thing, or is it more like that starting a firm was really what was going to work for your life and your lifestyle and your family?
Well, I mean, I had always thought about owning a business, but it wasn't like something inside of me that, I was driving toward. I felt like having an MBA, I was probably more prepared to start a business than some other people. I had, run my own pretend business when I was little, with fake customers and fake invoices and all kinds of stuff. So, I mean, I'd always been interested in business, and I had taken some entrepreneurship classes during my MBA, but it wasn't like I want to go out and create the next app and be on Shark Tank. That wasn't what I wanted to do.
So did you, and I'm just sort of curious because like you and your husband sound like you're very busy people and you have these two kids. Like, was there any negotiation around like being able to work from home and that is more time with the kids? Or like, I guess, how did that side of things go in terms of sort of family life?
Well, for me, I wanted to find a job that would allow me to be there for them and, drop them off at school and pick them up from school at the end of the day. Next year will be the first year where they're both in school a regular day. We had, I had kept them in daycare the whole time that I was starting my business because I knew I couldn't do it with kids at home. So I didn't want to be a full-time mom, but I wanted to have that balance. And my husband works very hard at his job, but he wants balance too. And so we weren't ever the family that was willing to sacrifice, working 60, 70, 80 hours a week for a job.
So you decide, let's see, so this would have been, remind me, January of 2015? That is when you quit? February. Okay. So February of 15. Were you through your CFP coursework at that time, or are you still working on it?
No, I was about maybe 2/3 through it. One of the people I had reached out to about doing an informational interview was Dave Grant. And because he was semi-local to where I was located outside of Chicago. And he emailed me back and he said, if you want to know about starting your own firm, you need to look up XY Planning Network. And you need to talk to Alan
thanks,
more.
Dave.
And so I'm happy to talk to you, but you just really need to look into XY Planning Network. And so I'm pretty sure you and I had a phone call maybe the first week of March, like right after I quit, and I pulled the trigger, joined XYPN. I think it was like March 18th, maybe. Immediately started studying for the Series 65, just dropped the CFP coursework like a hot potato and started studying for the 65, which I passed luckily at the end of April, and was working on my registration in Illinois, and then picked up the CFP coursework again while I was waiting to be registered. And I finished that in August. I got registered in June of 2015. I finished the coursework in August, and I sat for the test in November of 2015.
Wow. What a year, huh?
Yeah. We don't like to take time off and just rest.
So quitting your job, getting a firm started, getting the CFP passed, and all the coursework done in Series 65, no big deal. It's just another year in the life of an entrepreneur. So that is so awesome. So sort of getting started, did you decide to work from home? Did you go get an office space? What was sort of the structure of your firm at first?
Yeah, so I decided to work from home. We had an extra bedroom in our house that I turned into my office, and that was great for me to be able to be at home. I mean, obviously the kids were still in daycare, but I had the opportunity to just sort of set my day, the structure. I had a lot of studying still to do, obviously, when I first started, and I was able to do that, in the quiet of my own home and keep my expenses down by not going to get office space. Because at the time, I didn't really know what kind of firm I wanted to have. I think at some point in the future, I want to have a physical office presence. But I didn't need to have that starting out. And my husband and I had already talked about potentially relocating somewhere else for his job. So I didn't want to commit too much to the local area by opening up a physical office space.
Yeah. So whenever you got started, you kept studying for the CFP. So this is something I see a lot of planners that either haven't completed the education or haven't passed the exam yet because they don't meet the experience requirement for the CFP. They sort of put that on hold and just wait it out, and just say, well, I'm just going to focus on building my firm. I'll study later and take the tests later. Are you glad you went ahead and did CFP coursework when you did, or did you feel like the route you took was a bit of a distraction from actually getting your firm up and running and maybe you would have done it differently?
It never occurred to me to not finish it right away. So I can't say that again. I can't say that I put a lot of thought into it, but for me, I wanted to finish that up because I had gotten so far through it. The program that I was in, the online program at Boston University, it was meant to be a 1-year program. And it was sort of a hybrid online and self-study program. So we had webinars every 2 weeks on Wednesday, and I had gotten behind on those webinars, obviously, but you could go back and listen to them and catch up with the coursework. So I really did want to keep it to that year that I had originally committed to and finish up in August. So that was really kind of what was driving me, was at some point I was going to lose access to all those materials through the online program, and I didn't want to have to pony up for that again. And then as far as the test is concerned, I wanted to do that as soon as possible after I was done with the coursework.
Did you feel like that education was then helpful as you were getting started and just sort of knowing what you needed to know to do financial planning? I mean, because that's usually, you've heard us say, like, that's our recommendation is, go get the CFP because you learn how to be a financial planner, right? And how to do financial planning. Do you agree with that in terms of, I guess what I'm asking is, has it been helpful to go ahead and knock that out right as you were getting started?
Yes and no. It gave me it taught me a lot of things I didn't know. I don't use probably 90% of it in my actual practice.
That's so true.
I mostly focus on people that have problems that I feel like I have experience in, whether that's switching jobs or having kids or student loans or buying property. Those are the things that I feel like my experience brought to the table when I started my firm, not the stuff I learned about, grats and gruts and crats and cruts and, in my CFP coursework. So it gave me the confidence that, yes, I can do this because now I know all this stuff. But in practice, I don't know how much I've actually used it.
Yeah. And I know it's one of the frustrating parts for folks, especially when they're starting a firm and you're doing financial planning while you're studying for the CFP or going through the coursework, because you're like, I'm never going to need any of this. And you have to know it, right? You've got to know that a grat and a grut are two different things, and that there are these things you use in estate planning so that when, something comes up, you know where to go look for the information, right? You don't literally need to be able to recite the difference between the two in 10 years. You just need to know that they exist. And it can be, I find it frustrating because I'm all about efficiency. I find it frustrating to learn things that I don't need for my immediate need, but it is important to know. So it can be frustrating, especially when you're getting started, because there's other things you want to be doing with your time, like going to get clients instead of memorizing, what gruts are.
But now I'm glad it's done. So it's over with. And all I'm doing now is getting experience.
Yeah, that's a fair point too. It's like, once it's done, it's done. You never have to go back unless you don't get all your CE done every 2 years. So always get your CE done. Otherwise, you never have to take the test again.
Well, no, it was funny because I didn't know that I had to once you've a year after you pass the test and you haven't completed the experience requirement, you start accruing CE that you have to do. And I had no idea. So all of a sudden I was like, oh, I need to get CE. And so I've had to start doing that.
Yeah, this past cycle, so the CE cycle ends in your birthday month. So, my birthday's in April. So the end of April of this year, I had to get all of my CE in. And as many conferences as I go to, I just never register for the CE. I just attend or chat or whatever, and I just never actually get credit. And I realized at the last minute that I was short on CE. So that was a really fun little rush at the end to try to get all the CE because, again, but once you're late, and I don't know if there's any grace period. I don't think there is. You get to retake the exam. So fortunately, I did not have to retake the exam, but I was turning in very late. But anyway, that's just my procrastination. So you had mentioned that you and your husband had talked about potentially moving because of his job, and for listeners, now you're in San Diego and you got started in Chicago. So can you talk a little bit about the decision to move your firm and what that looked like for y'all?
Oh gosh. So first of all, I should set the stage by saying that my husband, it wasn't to get a new job. So he still works for Guaranteed Rate Mortgage, but he supports the West Coast. So their headquarters is in Chicago and he supports the West Coast. And his boss is out here and had been working on us for 2 years to get us to think about moving since probably, I don't know, 2014. And we were in a position, I owned a condo that I had bought before I got married that was upside down in Illinois, and we bought a house. And so we had this property and I had to get rid of the condo and blah, 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 blah. So we had some complicating factors. And also I'm a financial planner and there's no financial plan I could create that made sense to move from Chicago to San Diego. It just doesn't, the finances are just not there. But eventually,
it's a lifestyle choice for sure.
Right, exactly. So we had actually thought about Denver. We had thought about Las Vegas. We had thought about a couple of different areas. We put our house on the market in 2016 during the summer and said, hey, if it sells, we're going to move. And it didn't sell. And so we didn't go anywhere. And then in the spring this year, we decided to put it on the market again. The market had improved a little bit. We felt like we could get out of our house all of the money that we had put into it. And that was really my husband's concern. And I had sold my condo in the summer of 2016 as well. He's like, we got to get money out of this house to make sense to move to Southern California. And so we were able to do that. Our house sold in 3 days for a lot over ask. That was kind of our sign. Obviously last summer we weren't meant to go to Denver. Okay, fine. Southern California, here we come. And so about 30 days later, we were in a car on the way here.
Oh, wow. 30 days.
Yeah, it's like 30 days
so
from
awesome.
when we listed our house, we were in a car with our dog and driving across the country.
Y'all do not take long for decisions, which is awesome.
Well, it's funny. I mean, being a financial planner, you would think I would put more thought into some of these decisions, but I'm also a believer in, sort of the universe and fate kind of working with you when something is right. I'm a big fan of the book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and I just kind of believe that the universe conspires to help you out when you're moving in the right direction. So I felt like this move to Southern California was the right way to go.
Gotcha. So, okay, so that was 2 years or almost 2 years into your practice is when you made that move. So how did you communicate that to your clients? Because I'm assuming you had a few clients, which we'll go back and talk a little bit about sort of where your initial clients came from, that sort of thing. But so I guess question one is, how many clients did you have that you were working with when you made that move? And then two is, how did you communicate that you were going to be moving locations?
Right. And I realized I didn't at all answer your question that you asked about the decision to move my firm the first time. So I had told my clients in the summer of 2016 that I had put my house on the market. I would say 2/3 of my clients are people that I know personally. And we can talk more about sort of my clients and the number not being as high as I would like them to, but about 2/3 of them are people that I know personally. So they knew sort of my situation, my husband's situation. And, I had always said I'm, semi-virtual. I'm happy to do in-person meetings because you guys are local, but that may not be the case forever. And so they were cool with it. And I had a couple of clients that weren't even located in Chicago that I had done virtual work for anyway. They all knew that we were thinking about moving. And the new clients that I picked up after the summer of 2016, I let them know, hey, I might not be here forever. And most people can't say that they're going to be in a specific spot forever anyway. So they're like, okay, great, no problem. I feel like we can work together virtually if you move out of Illinois. So that conversation was fairly easy to have with them.
And the thing is, a lot of people are terrified of that conversation. So we did a podcast on it a year ago now that it was one of the only solo podcasts I've done, but on my move from Wisconsin to Montana. And I get a lot of questions from folks about like, how do you tell your clients you're going to move it? And there's a lot of fear around it. But I love your point that like most people move. Well, pretty much everybody moves, and pretty frequently, especially when you're a Gen X or Gen Y or so, like, the clients may not care as much as maybe we think they do, but it sounds like you were sort of doing it over time. You weren't hiding anything or trying to just wait until it was absolutely going to happen to tell them. Like, you were communicating it over time. So there were no surprises.
I was very open with people of, sort of the options we were considering. One of my clients is actually in Denver, and I was telling him I might be moving out there. And then all of a sudden I emailed him. I was like, oh, by the way, we're going to California. He's like, what the heck? People are moving for their careers all the time. So I think I was always upfront and open with them the whole time.
So do you still go back to Chicago some? I guess you're still pretty close into it, but or is the plan to go back to Chicago from time to time to meet with clients, or are you just going to stay in San Diego and, if they want to meet with you in person, I guess they can come out?
Yeah, the house is always open if people want to come to me. But yes, my plan is to go back to Chicago every once in a while and meet with people. There's people that I would go there specifically to just see them, but I have tons of friends there. I've got, I lived there for almost 17 years. So it's definitely the plan to go back and visit and to see clients, although not any time between like November and March or April. It's going to be more of a fall and summer, spring, summer trip.
It's so true. And it does not take long of being out of that level of cold before you're not used to it. So like, you will not want to go back ever again, probably.
Although now I'm excited. I'm thinking, well, now I can go skiing somewhere in March and feel like that's a treat. We never wanted to go skiing in March before.
You can come out to Montana. We have some of the best skiing in the country. So come out and see Team XYPN. Love it. Yeah, let's take a step back and just talk about the initial launch. So, you were obviously you had some level of connections just because you had some work experience and different careers and sort of an established base and that sort of thing. But being new to financial planning, where did you, I guess, target for your initial clients, and how did you communicate what you were doing and sort of have that confidence to bring on clients being new to financial planning?
Yeah, so I had done a lot of talking about what I was going to be doing while I was still at GE Capital. Since I had started the CFP coursework, I was pretty much telling everybody I was going to switch careers even before I actually did. And I was getting feedback from my peers and asking them, do you have a person that you work with? What kind of problems would you work with somebody on? What price points would you be willing to pay? And I did a lot of peer research and trying to understand what my demographic really wanted to see. I was hoping that when I left GE Capital that I would have several clients who would be interested in hiring me. Unfortunately, about a week after I left, GE announced that they were selling all of GE Capital. And the majority of people that I worked with all of a sudden weren't sure if they had jobs. And it was not the right time in my opinion, it was the perfect time for them to hire a financial planner. But in their minds, they weren't ready to do that. And it was sort of, I don't know if I'd call it a devastating blow, but it was very disheartening for me that all of a sudden, all of those people that I had talked to that seemed interested were no longer interested. And even though I tried to say this is a perfect time, we can structure the services in an affordable way, for you to be able to do this, it just didn't resonate with them at that time.
Yeah, that is a devastating hit to your business plan that, a week in, all of your potential clients basically that you thought were going to sign on were all of a sudden in limbo. And so how did you handle that? I mean, that's a pretty significant shift.
Well, I started trying to think about where else I could look for clients, and I started blogging and I started trying to get my name out, because the problem with not having your CFP is that you can't be listed in a lot of the places that list, fee-only financial planners. And, one of the things I'd always heard you guys say is you want to be there when people are looking for you. You don't want to be going out and trying to convince people they need to hire a financial planner. And that's always been the tough part, because it's hard for me to be there where people are looking for people like me.
So have you found some places that have been successful for sort of that, be where people are looking even without the CFP, or has the blog been effective for that? Or have you found any other ways that have worked?
Well, I think the jury's still out on whether some of the areas that I'm in will work. I sort of developed a niche in college planning about a year ago, and I've been participating in several Facebook groups, with parents of college-bound kids. And so I also just signed up for the Saving for College Find a Professional page. So I'm trying to be in those places where people are looking for that type of service. And they're not, I wouldn't say that they're short-term success plays, really. They're more longer term. I think even Meg said, once she joined on some of the women in tech forums, it takes a while answering questions and getting your name out there for people to see you as the expert. I have a large LinkedIn, base. So I put articles out there. I write, posts, and I put them out on LinkedIn. So I try to work that as well. And I really wouldn't say that I've found any silver bullets yet. A couple of my clients randomly found me just by searching online, and I don't even know how. Because one said she searched for women professional financial planner in Chicago, and she found me, and I don't even know how that's possible, because anytime I search that stuff, I'm on the 10th page. It's hard to say what works.
Yeah, I always love it when clients are like, "Oh, we found you on Google." Okay, that was not helpful. Do you remember the exact keywords you used or search phrase? Which, of course, no one does. I'm like, I don't know. You're somewhere there. Okay, so just to sort of recap, you were getting started, and obviously the stuff with your prior firm had happened, so that base of clients wasn't really there. So how long did it take you to sort of get some traction and get a couple of those initial clients from sort of these other marketing or prospecting methods that you weren't expecting to have to do so early on?
Right. It was probably about 6 months where I finally started seeing some traction. And it's weird, because first 12 months I was in business, I kind of felt like I had more traction. And then the second year, I mean, granted, I moved across the country, and so the past 6 months are maybe kind of a wash, but I felt like the second year was going to be better, but it ended up being probably a little bit slower than the first year. And it's hard to know what to attribute that to, because I've tried to niche myself and really start focusing on the college planning space. But I just think it takes time, and it is what it is, and I'm just staying in the game for now. Because my husband and I always talked about this being a 5-year plan, because I have 3 years, to get the CFP, and I'm going to be attending the FPA residency in October and hopefully move that up a couple months. And so next spring is really when I see the clock starting for me. And, it's kind of like 2 years from there, what does my practice look like? And that's when I really make, the decision.
So just for listeners' benefit, so FPA residency is a 1-week program that FPA puts on, where it's like this super intensive sort of how to do real financial planning training. They bring in, I think, 6, they call them the deans, but they are very experienced financial planners that come in and teach you how they've been doing planning for years. But one of the 2 benefits, well, I guess 3 benefits. One, you get to meet a bunch of other really cool, probably younger planners that are getting into planning, because most CFPs don't go through the program. It's really a pre-CF, or, you've passed the exam, you've had the education, but don't have the designation yet. The second thing is you learn how to do real financial planning. I've never been through, but I've heard that there's just so much education there. But 3, you get 3 months of work experience towards your CFP in 1 week. So to your point, it basically knocks off, what is that, 1/12 of your of your work experience requirements. So is the primary motivator that CFP side, or have you sort of heard the same thing I have, where just like learning how to do real financial planning is a real value of going?
Yeah, so I've heard the same thing you have, that everybody I've talked to who's attended said it's an amazing experience. And, it's not so much the technical piece that they really focus on. It's more of the, I guess the behavioral side of things and the emotional and the, conversations with clients and those kinds of things. So that's what I'm looking forward to, as well as getting 3 months of credit for sure. And also meeting other people that are maybe in the same, similar situations that I'm in.
Right. So you said the first year you started getting some traction. Second year did take a little, things slowed down just a little bit. Do you think that was partly because of the move and just being distracted? Like, did the move affect your business, do you think? Or I guess, do you think it's just taking a while for the ball to get rolling a little faster?
Probably both. Because, we had our house on the market last summer and it didn't work out. And that stuff is always going to distract you, no matter how good you are at it. And then, I had a client fire me, which was always nice. So that was disappointing. I've taken the opportunity now that I'm out here to really sort of reset and say, hey, I want to build a more local practice here. So I'm making connections with the folks in the college planning space that I feel like would be good partners for me. And I'm really taking this opportunity to sort of say, okay, I'm here. I'm not leaving. I'm not going back to Chicago. So I might as well try to build a local practice and then go from there.
So tell me about the college planning niche. I guess, one, how did you sort of find this area of specialization, and sort of what drew you into it? And then what are you doing to be able to sort of grow this side of your business out?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I had a lot of student loans. Obviously, I'm still paying my business school student loans off. So I was always very knowledgeable about the student loan space. And, I started reading some articles and seeing people make posts about, oh, my son is going to XYZ college. How am I going to pay for that? And it just sunk into me, like, you don't want to be thinking about how you're going to pay for it when your child's already been accepted to school. And I started, because, my peers are starting to get, they have older kids now, because my kids are kind of young compared to other people that are my age. And, people started asking questions, and I realized, well, maybe I can provide some expertise in this area, and starting to understand the whole college admissions craze, because it's very, very different than when I went to school and when I applied for undergrad. I lived in an area of Chicago where it's just super competitive, and you just see so many parents that are stressed out. They're making poor financial decisions, and I really wanted to help out with that. I didn't really want to focus on the student loan side of things. I know there's a lot of planners that have younger clients that are trying to pay those off, but I really felt like I wanted to work with older clients that are getting ready to send their kids through it, to kind of help them keep from making maybe some of the mistakes that I made, but also making mistakes that would harm their financial futures, and for the parents, jeopardize their retirement. So that felt like a nice niche to get into. And I really, really felt for these people, and that they, felt like they don't feel like they have somewhere to go. So I started researching all of the different college planning software options out there. I ended up doing some of the coursework with Joe Messenger, and really feeling like this is a niche that fits really well with my experience and the desire that I have to help people make smart decisions and hopefully be able to build my business. Because part of what I've done is to put a service out there that's sort of a low entry level service where somebody could come to me and just get a college financial plan done, where, I sort of analyze everything and say, okay, here's where your kids are, how old they are, what kind of schools you might be thinking about, even if it's 3, 4, or 5 years out, what your history is, what your experience was paying for school, and, sort of here's what it looks like. And hopefully over time, those people will convert into full service financial planning clients.
No, that makes perfect sense. And just for listeners, Joe Messenger is sort of a college planning guru. We actually had him on the podcast back in episode 65. So you can go to XYPN or I'm sorry, xyplanningnetwork.com/65 and listen to him talk about his business. And he has since created a course for financial advisors. He's actually going to be he did a round of coursework for XYPN members, and then he has the course that he does, but he's also going to be doing a pre-conference at our conference this year. So for anybody that's interested in this space, because it's extremely complex. I mean, most financial advisors, the vast majority of them are not prepared. I don't care how many years of experience they have in the CFP and whatnot. They are not prepared to have a conversation with folks that are sending kids to college. You know, if you have a client with a kid that's a sophomore in high school, there is so much to do and so much complexity, not only on the financial side and just the number side, but also having the conversation with the parents that they can't afford to send their kid to Harvard, or the conversation with the kid that, hey, this college isn't free. It's not like you just sort of pick the best one and go. That there's so much going on there, and that is a tough conversation, and you need to be trained in that area if you want to try to dive into it.
Yep, for sure. And part of I would just want to say one other thing about this whole space with college planning has typically been sullied, maybe is the right word, by folks that are pushing insurance products, annuity products to help you hide assets for the financial aid forms. That's really where the industry got started. And about 95% of people that are in the college planning space are selling something, which is an incredible challenge for me, but it makes it all the more gratifying to be able to reach people before other people get them.
Yeah, I remember I saw Joe speak. He and I were both speaking at a conference together in Ohio. We did a Next Gen event. And I remember his first slide was like college pre-approval process. And I was like, oh, crap, here's another guy with some annuity product. And, and once he started getting into it, I was like, wait. This guy's legit. He's actually a fee-only college planning guy. And I had never heard of that before. Like, that's just this new concept that you can do college planning on a fee-only basis without having to sell annuities. And I do love his theory and sort of that structure of like, we're going to pre-approve you for a certain amount of money for college, and then we have to pick a college that fits that number, instead of like, I don't know, it's like just going out and like picking a house, like, oh, I want the biggest one over there. It's like, well, you can't afford that way. You have to look first at what you can actually afford and what you need, and then make those match, not just let's go pick the biggest one we can find.
Right. But so your point earlier about having that conversation with parents is very, very true. It's not an easy conversation to have. People are very used to having that conversation when it comes to cars or comes to houses. It's a difficult conversation to have. It just is. And I've received a lot more blowback than I would have expected from parents who don't want to face reality. And that's so frustrating. They're like, just tell me how I can borrow to pay for this. And I'm like, it just makes my heart sink, because I know that it's not going to end well.
Right. No, it's a great point that it's probably more communication of the information and getting realistic expectations set than anything. Because like you said, parents just sort of, we want to send our kids to the best college, and we'll do anything that we can for them to better themselves, including tank our own retirement, which we see time and time and time again.
Well, the colleges are businesses. They know this. They're out there marketing. They're out there branding themselves and portraying this, like you said, you send your kid to the best school that they can get into. Never mind that best is totally subjective, and what's best for them is not necessarily an Ivy League school. And oh, by the way, almost nobody gets in those places anyway. So it's a marketing machine from the colleges, and these poor parents are sucked into it.
Yeah. And it has been a long time, right? I mean, this has been, culturally speaking, it's sort of like the dream of home ownership. It's just like this expectation. Everyone must own a home, and everyone must go to college. And I'm actually amazed. Sometimes it's fun to look at those salary surveys of different careers that do apprenticeships or more training and that sort of thing, like becoming a master electrician, which does not require a college degree, and they make more money than a lot of college graduates do. And they didn't spend 4 years in college or spend $100,000 or more, probably $200,000 going to college.
And lots of people who did spend that don't have jobs.
Very true. And again, just being able to communicate that, because, I was talking with someone recently who said, like, my kid's going to go to college, but, they don't really want to, but they're going to go. And I was like, well, do they why? Like, well, that's how you better them. Like, that's how they're going to better themselves. They have to go. I'm like, you're going to spend a lot of money on 4 years of like wasted education. But anyway, that it is an interesting piece that again, like I think is an amazing area of focus because there are a lot of kids going to college, and so therefore there are a lot of prospective clients out there. This is not a small niche market. This is a pretty big swath of clients that you can help. You had mentioned one of the pages. It was at savingforcollege.com. Is that the one that you said that you had been able to put a profile on?
Yep.
And so are you using any software to do college planning, or is it all in Excel?
Well, so I've tried pretty much all of them. At the end of the day, I don't feel like there's one out there that's a silver bullet, to be honest. It is so emotional and relationship based coaching of parents. The numbers, once you learn sort of what affects the numbers, what affects a family's EFC, how to calculate that stuff, what's a proper amount of loans to take out, how to look at schools' net price calculators. Once you know all that stuff, I don't know that you necessarily need a particular software to do it all for you. I don't necessarily endorse any specific software, but I do like Joe's concept of the pre-approval, and I've sort of taken that and put that together with some of the materials that I had created prior to working with him. At the end of the day, it's about parents figuring out sort of their financial situation first, then putting together that pre-approval number, and then making the smart decision on the end. Because if you do all that work and then they make a bad decision, then no software is going to help them, and people are under the impression that there's a lot of tricks and things that you can do to avoid paying your fair share or what the school thinks is your fair share. And there just isn't. For the majority of parents who have over, say, $150,000 in income, there's very little they can do to affect the financial aid formulas.
It's amusing to me the way you're talking about college planning software is the way that most of us also talk about financial planning software, where we're like, oh, this is great, but not all that helpful because it doesn't actually address the underlying behavioral issues. It's great to have the numbers. The truth is you can do most retirement calculations on the back of a napkin. It's really not that hard. I can't do a Monte Carlo simulation, nor do I need one for a young client. What I need is the ability to communicate that. And maybe the software is headed that direction, that it'll start getting more of the behavioral side in there. And I don't even know what that looks like. It's a dream that I hope someone else solves because I would have no idea where to start. But it's the art side, right, of financial planning. It's not just the science. So I have very limited experience testing the various softwares. I don't know if any are currently winning out or getting traction, or if they're all sort of struggling to find their spot, because it is it's a specific niche. There's not a lot of advisors out there buying college planning software, so I imagine it's a tough marketplace to be in.
Well, and I think part of the problem is that you do have those insurance salesmen that are buying college planning software to make themselves look more of an expert in the field. At the end, and you do have other planners out there who are buying software to help them serve a need that their clients have. They're not necessarily targeting that niche. They're serving the needs of their current clients. And I do think the software can help them know enough to maybe be a little dangerous, but it does help them. I mean, it helps to at least have software rather than just going into those conversations blind. So, they have their place for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I will put it out there that, part of the CFP board's tenets and code of ethics, as well as just sort of my opinion on being a fiduciary for advisors out there that are thinking about walking into their office to have a meeting with a client to talk about college planning, and you don't have this level of expertise, please, please, please hire Nannette or somebody else to come in and help with this, because you are not being a fiduciary if you try to help in areas you're not an expert. And you can really screw this up. Not only just the pure math side and just like making a bad recommendation there, but again, just not being effective at communicating, and helping a client understand the situation that they're in. So, and the truth about the situation and facing that reality. So do not try to do this on your own if you do not know what you're doing. That goes to many other areas. And I don't even know, do you work with advisors or have you done any work through other advisors, or is it all been primarily just working directly with clients?
Yeah, so I have done projects for other advisors where they've brought me in to help with that particular question with their clients. And I don't know if it's partially they want someone else to share the bad news with the clients, which is totally fine. The focus of most financial planners has been on helping clients save for college. And the assumption was that you tell them how much they need to save. Johnny's going to school in 10 years. This is how much school's going to cost. Here's what you put away. And that's kind of the extent of the college planning that they've done. The unfortunate part is that tuition is rising so fast and people aren't saving enough. People, especially in my generation, that are still paying off their own student loans. I'm not saving for my kids to go to college. So, the number of Gen Xers, I think, that are when their kids get to college that will have saved enough to send them to college is really small. So savings is not the answer. I mean, it's part of the answer, and it's great if you can do it, but it's not the whole answer.
Yeah, I was just talking to a guy that makes really good money. He's got 4 kids and talked to his financial advisor, and he ran a calculation for what does it take to send them to a good 4-year college. And he said the answer was you can't. So, when you factor in college inflation of whatever, 6 or 7%, and it's a discussion for another day on whether or not that could continue. I just have to believe at some point that bubble has to burst, and it's going to be pretty dramatic when it does. But
it's going to be ugly. The student loan crisis and the whole tuition thing. Yes, I agree with you.
Yeah, that will be interesting to watch. But it's happening. We see technology is starting to dig its claws into education more and more with on one side is like things like Khan Academy. And then on the other side, you've got Georgia Tech putting their master's in engineering, like it's a top 5 engineering program online for free, or I'm sorry, for very inexpensive. Like you don't even have to move to Atlanta. There's a lot of change coming. And I guess I am curious, do you have that conversation with clients on, hey, this is sort of how we're going to start, but there's probably change coming? Or do you just sort of stay focused on the way things are, and when that change happens, you'll adjust as needed?
No, I definitely tell people that I believe that this current scenario can't continue forever. I don't know. It's just like timing the market. You don't know when it's going to blow up, but at some point, like you said, the combination of technology, the combination of employers basically saying that these kids coming out of college they don't have the skills that we need. There's a disconnect between what people are being taught in college, and they're not being taught to think and solve problems and work in teams, and that's what employers want. So employers are sponsoring programs, sort of go through our program and then you have a job. I definitely tell people that you can't count on the current state of this situation to continue forever. So for people with younger kids, that brings up the question of how much do you want to put in a 529 savings plan? I think you need to spread, don't all put all your, eggs in one basket. You need to spread your savings around in case your kid comes to you and says, I want to travel the world for a couple of years and, start a business or something like that. Then maybe you can help with that.
No, that makes sense. So you've alluded to the fact that the first couple of years in business have been tough. Do you think now you would go back and recommend to Nannette 2 years ago, hey, go ahead and start your practice without the CFP? Or do you think, if you could do it over, would you have gone and gotten a job and gotten some more experience or whatnot to be able to start with the CFP? Do you have any thoughts on that at this point?
I try not to second guess myself. What I will say is I went into it with the thought that there's always a plan B or C or D. I could join up with another planner. And that's something that I've always been thinking about, is joining up with somebody else that I could work with, because I never really envisioned doing this on my own forever. So that's sort of plan B, that's A really. Plan B is to just kind of keep doing it myself. Plan C is to just go get a financial planning job. And now that I've got 2 years of experience and I feel like I've, put some time in, running my own firm, I feel like I'm a pretty attractive candidate if I had to do that. Plan D is to go back to IT. At the end of the day, and I have an MBA and I have a 15-year career in IT, and I could totally do that too if I had to. So knowing that you have options always, to me, that makes it easier to make a decision that might seem a little bit more risky, at the front. But the other thing I will say is that the only way that this works is that my husband had a lot of income coming in. And I know that you guys have talked about that on a lot of the podcast. I mean, again, like I said, we were both paying off student loans. We're not the people who saved up 5 years worth of living expenses so that I could do this. We are the people who, I got lucky that my husband's career took off and he was making enough to cover, my loss of income plus losing money in a business, which, wasn't an option 10 years ago.
Yeah. And it's so tough for me because, obviously, you and all of our listeners know we're pro CFP and pro having work experience and all of those things. And, as a blanket general recommendation, we say get the CFP before you start a firm. That is my general recommendation, but it does not apply in all instances. And I remember a conversation with my major professor in college where I was getting my master's degree and then was trying to decide if I was going to get my PhD, which was going to take around 3 years. And I said, even in school, I was like, I want to start my own financial planning firm. And I think the PhD will give me a lot of validity and will help me bring in clients. And my major professor said it absolutely will, because he had his PhD in a firm. He said, having those letters will help you. But let's imagine 2 scenarios. Scenario 1 is you start a firm today. Where are you going to be in 6 years? That you spend the next 4 years building a base of clients and building up your business, and then you have 2 years after that initial 4-year period. Or you spend 4 years getting your PhD, and then you start your practice and you're 2 years in. Where are you going to be better off? And the truth is, you're better off just getting started, right? Because it's an extra 4 years of building up that client base. And no, I don't have the PhD, and no, I didn't have that sort of, extra layer of whatever the ego is really all it is to have those letters to be able to be confident. But it's a tough decision that there is no actual blanket recommendation that it works for some folks and it doesn't work for others. And I've heard some folks that say I got started and I'm glad I did. Some didn't and wish they had, and some, anywhere in between. So it's hard to say.
Right. Well, and I think too that for me, I didn't really feel comfortable going into a firm where I knew I wouldn't fit long term, and just sort of slogging it out for a couple of years to get the CFP and then leaving. I didn't want to do that. I just didn't feel like that was fair to the firm. And it wasn't fair to me because I had already spent 15 years in a career that I wasn't always 100% happy in, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And also I felt like I had a lot of life experience to bring to the table. I think younger people that are just out of school that may not have as much life experience, the answer is going to be different for them than it is for me. And, bringing to my clients that 15 years of experience being an adult, I think is valuable.
Yeah, I will say that I am not sure I've ever been in a situation where I've said, yes, 22-year-old, you should start your own financial planning firm. For the most part, blanket recommendation, that's not a good call. But to your point, when you have income and you have life experience and you have education, and it becomes a more interesting conversation that I think you can go either way depending on what's right for you. So as we're sort of wrapping up, I'll ask you the final question. If you could go back to younger Nannette, whether this is the Nannette thing about getting into financial planning or think about starting your own business, if there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give yourself, what would that piece of advice be?
Oh gosh. I just read The Game of Numbers by Nick Murray, and I think it would be learn how to sell better, because it's never really been something I've done well. I guess learn how to go out and find clients better.
Just really focusing on that marketing and prospecting side.
Yeah. And I'm an introvert, so that's really, really hard for me. I could have done better at the very beginning, and I would have told myself, Nannette, this is going to be hard for you to do because you are an introvert. I think that's what I would have told myself starting this out, that's going to be the challenge. It's not going to be the technical piece of anything. It's really going to be getting out there, putting yourself out there, introducing yourself. Hey, I do financial planning. This is how I help people. That's so hard for me to do. It still is.
Yeah. It's hard for me too. I totally understand that selling is hard, and we do focus a lot on the technical side and don't spend enough time focusing on but do you know how to sell the value of planning, and truly sell what we do? Because it's a tough thing. It's this weird intangible thing, and we try to make it tangible by I'll save you this much money on your taxes and this much on your investments and all of that. But really, it's not the real value we bring to the table. So
right. And so I'm learning more about that every day. And I do think that that's something that I will continue to grow into the longer that I do this.
Makes sense. Well, Nannette, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share with us about your first couple of years. I am so excited to see how life changes for you when you get to CFP, and I suspect things are going to ramp up before next spring because you still got a year before then. I have a feeling things are going to start rolling faster before then. So it'll be awesome to chat with you in another year or two to hear how that's gone for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.